The storm was unlike anything Commander Viktor Sokolov had ever seen. Waves clawed at the hull of his submarine, a monstrous silhouette cutting through the dark, churning waters of the North Atlantic. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the steel Leviathan, and for a brief moment, the world seemed suspended between chaos and silence. Viktor gripped the controls, his knuckles white, the hum of the engines and the creaking of the hull a chorus of tension. Somewhere deep beneath him, the ocean floor waited, vast and merciless. But this was not just another patrol. This was a mission so dangerous, so improbable, that if anyone survived to tell the tale, it would be remembered for decades. The vessel was a Type XXI U-boat, one of the most advanced submarines the Germans had ever built during World War II. Unlike the clunky, noisy submarines that had prowled the Atlantic earlier in the war, the Type XXI was sleek, almost futuristic, a shadow in the water, designed to operate silently, faster underwater than any previous sub. Its designers had poured everything they knew about naval warfare into it: streamlined hulls, battery packs capable of hours of submerged travel, torpedoes that could hunt without warning. It was the perfect predator, and as Viktor would soon discover, a machine capable of a life far beyond what anyone imagined. It was March of 1945, and the war was nearing its chaotic end. The Allies had broken the German codes, U-boats were being hunted relentlessly, and ports were being overrun. Most commanders saw the war as a losing battle, surrender inevitable. But Sokolov was different. He had grown up near the Baltic Sea, diving into icy waters as a boy, dreaming of machines that could glide through the depths. By the time he was 30, he had risen to command one of the new Type XXI boats. He was young, brilliant, and fearless, but even he knew the risks of the mission he had been assigned. His orders were simple on paper: intercept an Allied convoy transporting critical supplies to Britain, sink what he could, and disappear without leaving a trace. But in reality, it was nearly suicidal. Allied anti-submarine tactics had become devastatingly effective. Depth charges, sonar, aircraft patrols. Any mistake would mean death in the freezing Atlantic, the cold water claiming him long before rescue could arrive. Still, Viktor trusted his crew, all handpicked for skill and loyalty. Together, they moved like a single organism through the steel corridors of the submarine. Every lever, dial, and gauge had a meaning. Every command was precise, rehearsed, and deadly. As the submarine slipped beneath the waves, the surface world vanished. Sunlight refracted into watery patterns that danced along the hull. Silence, heavy and complete, filled the boat as the crew hunkered down, listening to the faint, eerie sounds of the deep. Somewhere above, a destroyer's sonar swept past without detecting them. Viktor allowed himself a brief smile. The Type XXI's design was a revelation, a silent predator in a world that thought it could hear everything. Hours passed like days. The tension was constant, the danger omnipresent. When the radar finally detected the convoy, Sokolov felt the thrill of a hunter. Ships lined up like prey, unaware of the shadow beneath them. Torpedo doors opened silently. The first missiles sped through the water, striking the lead freighter with devastating precision. Explosions erupted, fires igniting, sailors scrambling as panic spread across the decks. Viktor's crew worked with a precision born of countless drills, another torpedo, then another, until the convoy was shattered, pieces of hull and cargo scattering across the waves. But the victory was fleeting. Almost immediately, Allied destroyers began a counterattack, sonar pings hammering against the sub's hull. Depth charges began to fall in deadly arcs, water exploding around the boat in violent eruptions. The submarine lurched violently, alarms ringing, crew members shouting over the chaos. Viktor's mind was a calm eye in the storm. He ordered silent running, angling the submarine into deep waters where the sonar would struggle to find them. Every second was a battle between human skill and nature's cold, merciless power. For hours, they survived. The crew endured crushing pressure, near zero oxygen, and the constant threat of death. Viktor navigated through underwater canyons, past thermal layers that confused sonar, and over jagged ridges that threatened to crush the hull. When at last the sonar fell silent, the Type XXI emerged into the shadows, battered but alive. That mission, almost suicidal, was just the beginning. The submarine survived the war, unlike most of its siblings, many of which had been destroyed or scuttled. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Allies found the vessel abandoned at Kiel, yet intact. For most of the world, it would have ended there, just another war machine to be scrapped. But the Type XXI had a destiny beyond its creator's imagination. The Americans and Soviets both wanted the submarine. Its technology was revolutionary, a glimpse of the future of underwater warfare. For years, it served in secret programs, testing new tactics, stealth engines, and experimental weapons. It patrolled the oceans during the early Cold War, unseen by enemy eyes, gathering intelligence in missions so classified that the crews who served aboard often vanished from records entirely. Some of its patrols took it under the Arctic ice, where it glided beneath kilometers of frozen ocean, its hull groaning under the pressure, carrying spies and supplies to hidden outposts. The crew, meanwhile, became legends. Stories of impossible missions, sailing under enemy harbors, surviving storms that would have destroyed any other submarine, evading sonar hunts that seemed certain to catch them, spread quietly among naval circles. Every officer who served aboard swore the Type XXI had almost a personality of its own, as if it could sense danger and guide them to safety. The submarine became known in whispers as the Ghost, a vessel that appeared when least expected, struck with precision, and vanished without a trace. But even legends face danger. During one patrol in 1952, under the ice near the Barents Sea, the submarine suffered a catastrophic battery failure. Frozen water had seeped into the cells, threatening a deadly explosion. The crew fought for hours, improvising repairs in the freezing dark, their breaths fogging the control room. When at last they surfaced through a crack in the ice, the sun rising over a barren, icy horizon, they had not only survived, they had added another chapter to the myth of the Ghost. By the late 1950s, the submarine was no longer just a weapon. It had become a symbol of ingenuity, courage, and the unknown. Officers who had served aboard it went on to teach generations of naval commanders. Its technology influenced designs that would dominate underwater warfare for decades. And yet, for the general public, the Ghost remained invisible, a machine that had rewritten the rules of combat, but whose story was buried in secret files and whispered legends. And so, as Viktor Sokolov watched the Atlantic storm recede decades later, his mind drifted back to that first mission, when waves had threatened to swallow them whole, and yet, somehow, they had survived. He knew that the submarine story was far from over. It had outlived wars, ideologies, and even the men who commanded it. The Ghost was no longer just a vessel. It was a living memory of human skill, bravery, and the relentless drive to survive. The war was over, but the ocean did not forget. The Type XXI, the vessel that had haunted Allied convoys in the final months of World War II, had survived when most of its siblings had been destroyed, scuttled, or claimed as trophies. But survival came with a price. It was no longer a publicly acknowledged machine of war. To the world, it simply ceased to exist. Files were classified, crews reassigned, and records vanished into secret archives. For the rest of humanity, it was just another ghost story whispered among naval officers. In May 1945, American and Soviet engineers descended upon the submarine, each faction eager to study the revolutionary design. The U.S. Navy saw it as a treasure trove, batteries that allowed submerged endurance beyond anything previously imagined, hull design optimized for speed and stealth, a hydrophone system capable of detecting enemy vessels miles away. The Soviets, already planning their own Cold War expansion, coveted the blueprint to replicate the machine for themselves. In the end, the Ghost was partitioned, not dismantled, not destroyed, but hidden. It disappeared into a private naval testing facility in the northern Baltic, where only a handful of technicians knew its location. Viktor Sokolov, the commander who had led her through the North Atlantic's fiercest storms, watched helplessly as bureaucrats and engineers claimed ownership. He was offered reassignment, medals, and promises of prestige, but none of it mattered. The submarine that had been his life, his crew, and his home was vanishing from history. And yet, even in secrecy, the Ghost refused to be tamed. By 1947, whispers of a submarine had begun circulating among Allied intelligence networks. Rumors described a vessel moving beneath the ice, ferrying agents across borders, gathering intelligence from behind Soviet lines. No nation officially acknowledged these operations, but the reports were consistent enough to draw attention. The Ghost, the Type XXI, had become the ultimate spy. No sonar could detect her. No enemy radar could track her. She could surface in the middle of the night, drop off personnel, gather photographic reconnaissance, and disappear before the morning patrols had any idea she existed. The first missions were experimental, almost reckless. A small crew of American and former German engineers volunteered to test endurance runs under the Arctic ice. Viktor, pulled back into service as a consultant, watched as the sub glided silently beneath a frozen ocean, the ice forming a glittering, treacherous ceiling above them. Navigation was nearly impossible. Sonar often reflected off ice, creating phantom readings that could lead them straight into the crushing ceiling. For hours, the crew balanced skill and luck, charting a path through the labyrinth of ice floes. When the submarine finally surfaced in the cold polar dawn, it had survived conditions that would have destroyed any ordinary vessel. The story made it into secret files, but never into public history books. The Ghost's missions grew bolder. By 1950, the Cold War had intensified, and intelligence gathering became paramount. The submarine was deployed to shadow Soviet fleets, track nuclear test sites, and even transport undercover operatives into remote harbors along the northern Soviet coastline. Crews learned to navigate with invisible precision, relying on magnetic compasses, primitive sonar, and sheer intuition. For those aboard, each mission was a delicate dance with death. A single miscalculation, a sonar ping, a faulty valve, a misread ice layer, could mean the sub would never resurface. Yet, the Type XXI had advantages that seemed almost supernatural. Its hull, designed for silent underwater speed, allowed it to evade Soviet destroyers effortlessly. Its batteries could run submerged for days, outlasting any patrol craft. And its hydrophones, the auditory ears of the sub, could detect the faintest vibrations, from propellers miles away to the sound of enemy crews working on deck. The Ghost became legendary among intelligence circles. Agents spoke of it with awe, describing missions that seemed impossible to outsiders. But secrecy came with its own cost. The submarine and her crew were denied recognition, their exploits hidden behind walls of bureaucracy. Reports described daring raids that disrupted Soviet supply lines or gathered vital intelligence on new missile developments, but no medal or commendation ever accompanied the achievements. Crews aged in silence, returning home to civilian life, while the ocean retained the memory of their bravery. Viktor himself vanished from public life, working quietly as a naval consultant, his stories of near-death missions known only to a few select colleagues. By the mid-1950s, the submarine had evolved in ways no one anticipated. Engineers retrofitted experimental propulsion systems, tested new silent-running engines, and even experimented with miniature guided torpedoes. These modifications were often secret experiments for intelligence agencies, designed to push the envelope of naval technology. Each mission was a proving ground, each success a testament to the ingenuity and audacity of the crews. The Type XXI also found itself at the center of international diplomacy, albeit indirectly. In one clandestine operation, the submarine infiltrated a disputed northern passage to monitor a Soviet fleet exercise. The data collected informed secret negotiations and provided leverage during a tense standoff, preventing potential conflict. The submarine had transitioned from a weapon of war to a tool of silent diplomacy, influencing global events while remaining unseen by the public. Despite decades of service, the submarine remained remarkably resilient. Her steel hull, originally designed to withstand depth charges, endured missions that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Batteries were replaced, systems upgraded, yet the core of the machine remained intact, the same vessel that had survived the North Atlantic storms in 1945. Veterans aboard often remarked that the submarine seemed alive, almost sentient, guiding them to safety in moments of crisis. By 1960, the submarine was a living relic, a ghost of the past operating in the shadows of the modern world. It had survived wars, storms, espionage, and political intrigue. Yet even as jets and missiles dominated the oceans above, the Ghost remained a silent predator, reminding the world that some machines, and some legends, refused to die. The crews who served aboard the submarine began passing down tales of impossible missions, of ice-crusted Arctic nights, and of sonar readings that no human eye could interpret. These stories became part of a hidden lore whispered among naval academies and intelligence circles, fueling the imagination of a new generation of officers. And while the submarine remained hidden from the public eye, its legend only grew. Intelligence reports, now declassified decades later, confirmed missions that spanned continents, infiltrating enemy ports, monitoring nuclear tests, and even aiding covert operations in distant oceans. Each operation carried the same pattern: precise, silent, and nearly impossible to detect. The Ghost had become more than a machine. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, courage, and the relentless pursuit of survival in a world that had changed overnight. Its story, once hidden in secret archives, would one day emerge, inspiring generations to come. And the ocean, vast and eternal, had etched the memory of the Ghost into its depths, where it waits still, a silent witness to history, ready for its next. The ocean is vast, endless, and unforgiving, but for the Ghost, it was a home, a labyrinth of steel and shadow. By 1963, she had become legendary among naval circles, a name whispered in intelligence briefings and classified documents, though absent from any public record. Crews spoke of her with reverence, as if she were alive, and for good reason. The Type XXI was no longer just a machine. She had become an extension of the men who sailed her, a silent hunter capable of vanishing into the abyss without a trace. The Cold War was at its height. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a high-stakes game of espionage, nuclear brinkmanship, and secret maneuvers beneath the oceans. Submarines prowled the depths like invisible predators, and the Ghost, despite being a relic of World War II, was unmatched in stealth. Jets could not touch her, sonar could not reliably detect her, and her crews had become masters of silent navigation. They moved through the Arctic's frozen channels, threading beneath ice sheets, and avoiding Soviet patrols with uncanny precision. It was during one of these missions that the submarine's legend truly solidified. In the summer of 1963, the Ghost was tasked with shadowing a Soviet ballistic missile submarine navigating the North Atlantic, a vessel designed to patrol undetected and deliver nuclear weapons if the order came. The Type XXI, though decades old, could move with near invisibility beneath the waves, her batteries allowing days of submerged operation. The crew had trained for months, memorizing every maneuver, every emergency protocol, until the submarine became almost an extension of their instincts. Viktor Sokolov, now older, with silver streaking his hair and eyes that had seen the Atlantic's deadliest storms, commanded the operation. His hands, once steady at the periscope during wartime patrols, now guided the submarine through a narrow canyon of underwater mountains, the hull creaking under the pressure at depths that tested human endurance. Every meter mattered. One miscalculation could crush the vessel against the rocky seafloor. The Soviet submarine appeared as a shadow on the sonar, distant but unmistakable. The Ghost matched her speed silently, closing in without alerting the crew of the other vessel. For days, they tracked its movements, recording every maneuver, every communication signal. The data was priceless, revealing patrol patterns, nuclear readiness, and even crew routines. It was espionage at its most delicate, a dance of stealth and precision. But the mission was not without danger. One evening, under the Arctic's midnight sun, the crew detected a secondary sonar ping, another Soviet sub, hidden in the depths, stalking them. The tension was palpable. In that moment, the Type XXI's design became a lifeline. Her streamlined hull allowed her to slip silently between sonar beams, her batteries running at a whisper, and her hydrophones detecting the faintest vibrations. The rival submarine passed within meters, oblivious to the shadow gliding alongside it. Days later, the Ghost surfaced in the North Atlantic, just long enough to recharge her batteries and refresh the crew. The men emerged into a world of salt spray and cold winds, their faces gaunt from weeks beneath the surface. For them, the ocean was both home and adversary. Viktor stood on the deck, scanning the horizon, knowing that the world above often had no idea what occurred below. Every successful mission was invisible, unrecorded, and unrecognized. Yet each one shifted the balance of power in ways no public record could ever convey. The Type XXI's role expanded beyond mere shadowing. It became a courier of secrets, ferrying small groups of operatives into enemy territory under the guise of night and fog. These missions were perilous. Even a minor navigational error could strand them in hostile waters. Crews became adept at improvisation, solving life-or-death problems with nothing but skill and instinct. One night, a mechanical failure threatened to trap the submarine beneath the Arctic ice, and the crew spent hours in near-total darkness, manually rerouting power to critical systems, while Viktor barked orders that could mean life or death. The submarine survived, her crew emerging triumphant, and the mission was completed as if nothing had occurred. The Ghost also became a symbol of Cold War deterrence. Intelligence agencies understood that her presence alone was enough to disrupt enemy operations. Convoys would reroute, exercises would be delayed, and paranoia would ripple through command structures simply because a vessel capable of vanishing into the deep existed. In this way, the Ghost fought battles without firing a single torpedo, her victories measured in information gained and enemies unsettled. In the summer of 1965, the submarine undertook what would become one of her most daring operations. A remote Arctic research station, manned by Soviet scientists and military advisors, was suspected of developing a new sonar array capable of detecting vessels at unprecedented ranges. The Ghost, under cover of polar darkness, infiltrated the area. Crew members deployed miniature underwater drones, primitive by today's standards but revolutionary at the time, to map the station's underwater defenses. They surfaced in freezing waters undetected, collected data, and returned to the sub, all without alerting a single sentry. Back at base, analysts pored over the information. It revealed vulnerabilities in the station's sonar array, allowing NATO forces to plan operations with far greater confidence. Yet, publicly, the station remained secure, and the mission vanished from all official reports. For the crew of the Ghost, this was routine. Recognition was irrelevant. Survival, precision, and success were the only measures that mattered. Throughout these missions, the Type XXI earned a reputation among her crew for almost supernatural instincts. Navigating the Arctic and North Atlantic was treacherous, filled with unseen icebergs, unpredictable currents, and hidden shoals. Yet the submarine seemed to sense danger, responding to commands with uncanny agility, as if guided by a mind beyond human comprehension. Veterans aboard would later describe moments when the vessel itself appeared to protect them, gliding through hazards that should have crushed her under pressure. By the late 1960s, the Ghost had transitioned into myth within naval circles. New submarines, nuclear-powered and equipped with advanced technology, dominated headlines and public consciousness, but the Type XXI persisted in shadow. She was no longer merely a vessel. She had become a symbol of silent power, of ingenuity that refused to be forgotten, and of human courage operating beyond the recognition of the world above. As the Cold War continued, the submarine undertook a mixture of surveillance, intelligence, and covert support operations, shaping the course of conflicts and strategies in ways that would remain classified for decades. Every mission reinforced the legend, an unassuming World War II relic, navigating the icy depths, outsmarting enemies, and surviving conditions that would destroy modern vessels. The Ghost submarine had proven that even in a world of supersonic jets, nuclear missiles, and sprawling navies, old machines, when piloted by skilled and courageous men, could still alter history. And beneath the surface of oceans that stretched from the Arctic to the Atlantic, she waited, silent, patient, and eternal, a hunter that the world forgot, but one that refused to be forgotten itself. By 1970, the world above had changed, but the abyss below remained timeless. Nuclear submarines with missile silos dominated headlines, and naval strategy revolved around speed, firepower, and deterrence. Yet the Ghost, the Type XXI from a forgotten war, continued her silent existence beneath the waves. What made her extraordinary was not just her stealth, but her uncanny ability to adapt, even decades after her design seemed obsolete. The crew had changed. Veterans from her early Cold War missions had retired or passed into legend. Younger sailors, drawn by rumors of a living ghost, took their place. They were meticulous, obsessed with precision, and eager to prove themselves worthy of handling the legendary vessel. They learned that every bolt, every rivet, every creaking panel had a story. Unlike modern submarines built for automation, the Ghost demanded attention. She required instinct as much as skill, and those who commanded her learned quickly that in the depths, hesitation could be fatal. It was during a mission in the North Atlantic that the Ghost faced her greatest challenge yet. Intelligence indicated a clandestine Soviet operation, a secret undersea installation believed to be testing advanced sonar detection techniques. For the first time, the mission would require the Ghost to operate in waters patrolled not only by conventional forces, but by state-of-the-art nuclear subs capable of tracking vessels for hundreds of miles. Detection would mean death, or worse, capture. Commander Viktor Sokolov, older now, still led the crew. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned sonar readouts and navigational charts with the calm of a man who had survived storms, war, and the relentless pressure of the ocean. He knew that the slightest error could turn the centuries-old vessel into a tomb. The Ghost had survived by being unpredictable, by exploiting what her pursuers did not expect. Nuclear submarines, fast but cumbersome at depth, often underestimated the agility of her Type XXI hull, honed for silent, low-speed maneuvering. They entered the operational area at midnight, the Arctic sun casting a dim glow on the horizon. Icebergs floated like ghosts on the surface, their jagged forms hinting at hidden danger beneath. The Type XXI slipped below the thermocline, where sonar was unreliable, and the world above faded into a weightless silence. The crew worked in coordinated precision, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. Hours into the mission, a sonar contact appeared. Slow-moving, deep, unmistakably a nuclear-powered adversary. The Ghost's hull vibrated subtly as the crew held their positions. Viktor ordered a series of evasive maneuvers, exploiting underwater currents and terrain to mask their signature. The sonar operator, young Petrov, sweated under the pressure. Every ping, every anomaly could reveal them, yet the Ghost seemed to anticipate each threat. It was as though the submarine itself guided the crew, a partner rather than a machine. The installation they sought was located beneath a trench, where depth charges from above would be ineffective, and radar could not penetrate. Here, the Ghost had to navigate using only dead reckoning, periscope observations during brief surfacing, and intuition. The crew deployed a series of small reconnaissance drones, remotely mapping the undersea facility. These primitive machines, tin can constructs by modern standards, recorded structural layouts, sensor placements, and patrol patterns. Suddenly, a warning light blinked. Another contact, a Soviet nuclear submarine, had detected the presence of the drones. The Ghost's crew went silent. Viktor made a split-second decision, steering the sub into a narrow canyon of underwater rock formations. The nuclear vessel, unable to match the maneuverability, passed dangerously close, only to lose contact seconds later. The crew exhaled collectively, but the tension lingered. One mistake, one misjudgment could have cost them their lives. Inside the trench, the Ghost completed her mission. Data was gathered, evidence of covert operations recorded, and photographs of sensitive installations captured. The operation was flawless, yet the margin for error had been razor-thin. On the surface, the world remained oblivious, No headlines would report the success. No medals would be awarded. Victory in this age was invisible, yet it mattered all the same. However, this mission left a mark on the crew. They realized the world above had grown more dangerous. Detection technology had evolved, and the Ghost, while still formidable, relied on her crew's skill more than ever. The submarine's legend provided a psychological edge, but the reality of modern warfare reminded them that myths could not replace preparation, training, or courage. In the months that followed, the Ghost undertook a series of covert missions in the Mediterranean and North Atlantic. Each operation tested the limits of the vessel and her crew. They intercepted communications, mapped foreign fleets, and shadowed submarines with nuclear payloads, all while remaining undetected. The Type XXI's quiet power became a weapon in itself, a reminder that even relics of the past could shape contemporary conflicts if wielded with intelligence and bravery. Yet, the submarine's legend grew beyond mere military operations. Stories circulated of her phantom-like appearances in the most impossible circumstances, surfacing silently near a heavily patrolled harbor to gather intelligence, slipping beneath enemy destroyers undetected, or disappearing entirely into the darkness after narrowly avoiding depth charges. She became not only a tool of strategy, but a symbol, a vessel that defied time, whose power lay as much in the imagination of those who feared her as in the steel and machinery that composed her. By the late 1970s, discussions began in intelligence circles about decommissioning the Ghost. She was old, maintenance was increasingly difficult, and nuclear submarines had rendered many conventional models obsolete. Yet those who had served on her resisted. They argued that her history, her adaptability, and her unmatched stealth were irreplaceable. To lose the Ghost would be to erase decades of covert victories from memory, victories that had shifted power balances quietly, invisibly, and decisively. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Ghost would be retired from active service, but not scrapped. She would be preserved, maintained in readiness for special missions if needed. The decision honored her history, while acknowledging the changing realities of naval warfare. Yet even in retirement, she remained alive in the consciousness of those who had served aboard her, the men who had trusted their lives to her steel hull, who had witnessed her almost supernatural instincts in action, and who knew that she had earned her place as more than a vessel. She had become a guardian of secrets, a shadow in the deep, and a legend whose influence extended far beyond the waves. By the early 1980s, the Ghost had become more than steel and machinery. It was myth. Stories of her exploits circulated quietly in naval intelligence circles, whispered in debriefing rooms, and studied in classified documents. She had survived decades of conflict, pursued by nuclear submarines, evaded detection in hostile waters, and completed missions that changed the course of covert operations. Yet, time weighed heavily on her hull. Rust crept along seams that had once resisted the pressures of the deep with ease. Systems required constant attention, and her crew now balanced reverence for history with the brutal reality of maintenance. Her final mission came unexpectedly. A powerful storm had sunk a research vessel in the North Atlantic, far from any rescue services. Survivors clung to debris, their chances slim as icy waves and hurricane-force winds battered the open water. Modern rescue ships were slow to reach the site. The Ghost, despite her age, was fast, silent, and uniquely suited for operations beneath the storm's wrath. Commander Viktor Sokolov, older now, stared at the mission coordinates. The crew looked to him with trust bordering on awe. They knew the submarine's capabilities intimately, but the sea was unpredictable. The storm was relentless, and surface conditions were treacherous. Victor's calm voice cut through the tension. We've outrun storms, evaded hunters, and faced the abyss. Today we save lives. The Ghost will lead. The Type XXI slipped beneath the waves, moving into the heart of the storm. The sonar officer, young and nervous, reported on debris patterns and survivor locations. Victor guided the vessel with surgical precision, threading her through floating wreckage and submerged obstacles invisible to the naked eye. It was a ballet of tension, metal against water, courage against fear. hours passed, and the first survivors were located. The Ghost's crew coordinated rescue operations using lifeboats tethered to the submarine, hoisting the injured into the safety of her compartments. The storm raged, but the submarine's silent, unyielding power prevailed. By dawn, all survivors were aboard, shivering, exhausted, but alive. No modern ship could have achieved this in the time it took the Ghost to maneuver and save the stranded crew. The operation became classified immediately. Newspapers reported the rescue in vague terms, attributing it to a naval task force. Only the crew knew the truth. A relic of a bygone war had performed a modern miracle. Yet, even as accolades were quietly whispered, the reality set in. The end was near for the Ghost. In her final months of active readiness, she was deployed one last time. This mission was not to rescue or spy, but to preserve history. She navigated once more through the waters where she had first earned her name. In the Arctic, among the submerged ice ridges, Viktor and his crew performed exercises, retracing maneuvers from decades past. Cameras documented her hull, her instruments, and the quiet hum of her engines, preserving knowledge for future generations. When the day of decommissioning arrived, ceremonies were muted but poignant. The Ghost slid into dry dock, not with the fanfare of a warship, but with a silent dignity befitting a vessel that had witnessed more than most could imagine. Her crew filed past, saluting steel that had saved lives, gathered intelligence, and earned legend status. Viktor lingered at the conning tower, tracing his hand over cold metal, feeling the weight of decades, the echoes of missions long past. Yet the Ghost was not gone. She became the centerpiece of a naval museum, preserved for posterity. Visitors marveled at her sleek lines, her worn panels, and the instruments that once guided men through perilous depths. Veterans recounted stories of near disasters, of close encounters with enemy submarines, and of missions that would never appear in history books. Young sailors studied her, inspired by a vessel that demonstrated that ingenuity, courage, and dedication could bend the limits of technology and human endurance. In the decades that followed, the Ghost inspired filmmakers, historians, and engineers. She became the subject of documentaries and books, each telling a version of her exploits: the silent Arctic patrols, the covert Cold War missions, the heroic rescues, and the near-mythical tales of her ability to evade detection in hostile waters. Engineers studied her design to improve modern submarines, while historians preserved every story, knowing that her legacy was not just the mission she completed, but the spirit she embodied. By the 21st century, the Ghost was no longer operational, yet she remained alive in imagination and memory. Her influence could be seen in naval training programs, in submarine design philosophy, and in the quiet reverence with which sailors spoke of her. She was the bridge between the past and the present, a symbol that even the relics of history could adapt, endure, and continue to impact the world. And so, the Ghost rests now in dry dock beneath protective hangars, her engines silent, her hull intact. But in the minds of those who served aboard her, and in the hearts of those who know her story, she still moves through the depths, a phantom of courage and innovation. A vessel that defied the limits of its time, saved lives, and proved that legends are built not just on victories, but on endurance, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of duty. Some nights, sailors claim that if you stand quietly near the dock, you can hear her hum, soft, steady, eternal, a reminder that legends never truly die. They wait, patient, beneath the waves, ready to rise again if the world should ever need them. The Ghost Submarine had survived history, not merely as steel and rivets, but as a living, breathing testament to what human determination and engineering could achieve.